Okay, hey guys, it's Angela.
And my name is Caitlin, and this is Earthlistening.
Today we sat down with Katie Watson, a marine biologist. Katie is a diver and sea explorer and is a Seagrass Restoration Ph.D. student. Through her explorations in the water, Katie finds new discoveries every day about the ocean that are unique and extraordinary.
So I guess just like the first question is, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Hopefully this doesn't cut out because we're expecting thunderstorms here. So here on the sunny Isle of Man. So yeah, thank you. How are you guys?
We're doing pretty good. I'm doing good.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, for us, we're students, so summer is about to end. So we're going to have to start school soon.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Make the most of it while you can.
Yeah. Okay, Katie, so can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, like what you do?
Sure. So my name's Katie. I am currently a PhD student in my first year looking at how to improve seagrass restoration. Specifically, I'm looking at the species Zostera capensis in Langebahn Lagoon. I'm based at Stellenbosch University, but thanks to the crazy year we've had, I'm currently at home on the Isle of Man where I grew up. So it's just a tiny island between England and Ireland. So I'm enjoying the diving here, and that's a bit about me, really.
Oh, wow.
I guess here's another question. As a marine biologist, what do you primarily do?
So most of my time at the moment is spent on my PhD. I was hoping at this point to start my field work. At this point, I say that I'm working remotely. So at the moment, what I'm working on is defending my project proposal. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. What I'm leading up to. So basically, lining out what I'm going to be doing throughout the next 3 or 4 years. The specific questions that I really want to address. And then just to keep things interesting, I'm also volunteering for the Manx Wildlife Trust, which is our local wildlife trust. So I'm writing up their small shark tagging report, and also volunteering with a group called Sea Search who do marine wildlife, which is really important.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So so you're a PhD student, marine biologist, and you help with like seagrass restoration. So is there like a specific thing that made you decide you wanted to do this, or like was there any inspiration you had in order to pursue this type of pathway?
Great questions. I originally trained as a terrestrial ecologist. So during my undergrad, I did ecology and environmental management, and I worked as an ecological consultant for a couple of years. I really enjoyed it. There was parts of the job that I loved, but I knew I didn't want to do it forever. During my undergrad, I learned to dive while I was taking like a 2-month trip out to Madagascar, and I totally fell in love with that. So after graduating and working for a year as an ecological consultant, I just knew I wanted to go back to academia. So I went to study general conservation at the University of Leeds, and that's when I started studying with Dr. Maria Berger, who's one of the scientists who helped designate the Great Barrier Reef. So I did a couple of coral conservation projects with her, which was amazing. And then I did want to get into coral conservation as well, but then I also fell in love with seagrass at the same time. It's an amazing ecosystem, and I just love that I get to work outside and protect such an important ecosystem, really.
Oh,
So since you are dedicated to the seagrass restoration, can you explain more about that and what it is?
Yeah, sure. So the reason that seagrass is so important is that it covers approximately 0.2% of the area of our oceans, but it's responsible for at least 10% of all the carbon burial. So that means it's really important for offsetting climate change, which is obviously a massive problem affecting every species and habitat across this earth. You know, it's an ecosystem engineer, so in itself it makes its own ecosystem, so it turns just a barren patch of sand into this amazing system that supports invertebrates and fish that are important for 20% of the world's biggest fisheries, as well as subsistence fishing, improving water clarity, carbon burial that I've already mentioned. So it's, and you know, turtles and dugongs eat it, so why wouldn't we want to help them? But at the same time, what we're seeing is it's hugely threatened. So about a quarter of seagrass species are designated by the IUCN as threatened or near threatened, and it's estimated that around 58% of seagrass meadows are currently in decline. So seagrass restoration has been going on for nearly 70 years now, and the average percent success rate is about 30%. And really, when we're talking about climate change being a here and now problem, we need to really be increasing our success rate when we're putting money into conservation efforts and research like this, because obviously everyone is struggling now to get funding for these really important projects. So you have to do more with less. So what I'm specifically looking at is as I said, Zostera capensis, which is an endemic species in South Africa. So that means it's native to the African continent. And I'm looking at restoration in a few different ways. So you have to look at the ecological, physiological, and also the genetic aspects of restoration. So my first chapter is going to be looking at what core sizes and spatial arrangements that you can use to help speed up the recovery rate of seagrass once you've taken it from a donor seagrass meadow and then moved it to somewhere else. Because as soon as you can get a new seagrass meadow established with minimal impact on where you've taken the seagrass from, then that's a win-win. The second chapter of my research is going to be looking at taking measurements of temperature, salinity, wave action, things like that, and mapping across an estuary where is the most optimum place that we can place these translocated seagrass cores. What conditions are going to give that seagrass little plug the best chance of survival. My third chapter is looking at removing any biotic stresses. So obviously seagrasses root with their rhizomes into sand, and they need that sand to be compacted and condensed to be able to spread their root system. But you have things called bioturbators, which basically just loosen that sediment and make it difficult for the seagrass to bind and stay there. So I'm looking at using a mesh to exclude these bioturbators, which in Langebaan are mud prawns predominantly. So these tiny like shrimp things with massive claws, and they can rip through seagrass meadows. And as soon as you get any kind of wave action, the seagrass is just ripped up and it's gone. And then my fourth chapter is looking at using transcriptions. So basically looking at what environmental ranges seagrass can survive in. So what is the maximum temperature that it can survive in, minimum temperatures, what effect does nutrient input have on them and things like that, so that we know when you've got all these human impacts going on in an estuary, you can say that's well too high, or that's just too much for seagrass to be able to cope with.
Wow.
Sorry, maybe that was a really long answer.
No, but that was really amazing.
Yeah.
Right, I
Yeah.
never realized like how such a simple thing like a seagrass has so many factors that vary about how much they grow, how well they grow, and other things that like affect them. Like just temperature, the sand, the sediment being packed too tightly, too loose, and all that. Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
exactly. I mean, like, the thing with seagrass is that it's not as maybe charismatic as mangroves and corals, which you always see on Nat Geo or Blue Planet, but it's right there as one of like a keystone species almost, in the marine environment, and researchers are really only just now beginning to realize the threats and the solutions to all these really complex human and other biotic interactions that are going on. And with climate change, we really have to be ahead of the curve, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also one thing I really like about what you're doing is that you are like especially targeting the like ecosystems and like plants as like sea plants that are not really publicized in like media. Like yeah, there's like the coral reefs that are like being damaged, but then seagrass, they don't get as much attention, but yet they're also a vital part in the ocean and in the whole ecosystem.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
amazing.
So I've only really started to do science communication. I've been listening to a lot of great podcasts and following a lot of great people who've been doing loads of this stuff on Instagram for years, really. We are seeing a massive shift, open access data and papers, but because of all the jargon that scientists use all the time, and sometimes it's really, really technical, especially when you're talking about, like I was saying before, using transcriptomes to look at seagrass, how seagrasses are impacted by environmental variables. That kind of overwhelms a lot of people, but if you break it down into normal language that everyone can understand, then you start to get people interested, and you start to get people excited about this kind of research, which is really what you need to be able to kind of have any kind of impact. Because yes, scientific research and papers are really important, but comparatively not many people are reading those, so we need to expand, and yeah, as scientists we definitely can be better at science communication for sure.
Yeah.
I'm trying my small part.
Yeah, that's great. So like you've been working hard on like preserving the seagrass. So have you like what like parts of the ocean or seas have you explored and worked in? And are there any other places you would like to go and explore?
Yes, there's so many places I'd love to visit. So I'm only in my first year of my PhD, so I've only the Ostra capensis, the seagrass in one estuary in Langebaan. I wasn't even in South Africa for 2 months before I had to come home for the COVID-19 pandemic, sadly. But since I've been home on the Isle of Man, I've been helping study its cousin species. So over here in the Isle of Man and UK, we have Zostera marina, which is very similar. It's a bit hardier in that it is a little bit deeper. People have seen it flower. People can collect seeds. Project Seagrass, for example, is an amazing project that's helping to seed huge areas of seagrass meadows around the UK coastline. So that was amazing to be able to get to dive with Zostera marina. In terms of other places that I've looked at and researched, so as part of my master's, I was looking at, with global climate change and the oceans are warming, and the temperature ranges that corals and their associated invertebrates can survive in, that range is shrinking. So they're now starting to move either further north or further south towards the poles, where the water's slightly cooler. So we call that like tropical range expansion or poleward moving like shift, basically. So me and Carolina and Claire went to Japan, and we looked at tropical and subtropical sites in Japan, and basically we looked at what invertebrates and corals were there, and compared the tropical and subtropical sites and the species assemblage to be able to say, well, are tropical species moving to the subtropics, and what kind of impact that's going to have, because there's only so far north into the subtropics those species can go before you start getting like into the true poles and really cold waters, and what impact that's going to have on subtropical kelp forests as sea urchins move in there and things like that. So yeah, it was really interesting. We got to go there for 2 months, I think it was, something like that. And that was, it was an amazing experience, getting to survey all the amazing coral reef invertebrates and fish, and be able to be welcomed by the lovely Japanese people.
Yeah, I would assume that experience is very like interesting and like fun, because you get to just explore the waters, see the sea creatures, the corals, and all that stuff. It must have been really beautiful, huh?
Yeah, it was amazing. We just had the best time. I mean, we were so lucky because we did so much diving there that I actually, like on our very, very last day, our very last dive that we could have done, I got to do my 100th dive there. So yeah, it was amazing. It was on it was on this reef that had been really stunning the whole time, but then I don't know what really happened, but just all of a sudden it became even more stunning. I don't know, like the sun came out and it was like dancing on the corals, and loads of like silver bait fish were in the water, and the sun was reflecting off the silver fish, so it kind of looked like the water was sparkling. And we saw a ton of nudibranchs and a sea snake and an octopus, just all these amazing animals, and it was just it was unreal. that dive actually, it was far and beyond anything I've ever done or anything I've done since. I don't know really how I got so lucky with that one.
Well, that sounds really amazing.
Yeah, it was.
I guess
it definitely appreciation.
Because like for me, I never ever just went in the ocean, like really go diving. So just hearing you explain all these wonderful things, just finding like these creatures, I really think that's really extraordinary.
Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, that's why I set up my little Instagram page, is because most people don't get to see these things. And when you've got this massive discussion going on at the moment about how ethical are zoos and things, or aquariums and things like that, well, it's like zoos and aquariums are part of the reason I fell in love with the natural world, because there's an existence value to seeing something there in front of you, rather than just through maybe a screen. But if you can have more information and have more experiences of species and habitats, that especially if people can never afford to do these kind of things, or aren't really interested in doing the research but just want to know a bit more, then it really does help to give them at least an appreciation for why doing all this conservation and research is so important. I think it underpins and kind of justifies the need for it. Otherwise, I think it's important that people care about things that maybe they never get to see themselves.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point that aquariums, they there's a lot of ethical problems around it, but at the end of the day, that's also like one of probably like the only resources other people get to see, like the ocean life and all those creatures and animals, and just see how like they interact with each other. And I think that's really great that like you've been inspired by like aquariums, and that like helped you get inspired and want to be more dedicated in like marine life and all that. That's really nice.
And I think that also definitely just being there, like being with the sea creatures, is a better experience than just like what you said, just looking at the screen. And also looking at the aquariums, but just being in the water, that's a more different experience than just looking at them through there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of issue, should animals be kept in captivity? That's a really important discussion to have. But you can also see all the amazing impacts that zoos and aquariums do have for conservation, especially in terms of breeding programs and giving people existence value on species, as I've already said. And they really can be an educational tool, I think. If the standard of the zoo or aquarium is really high, and people are coming away with a love for species that are usually found on the other side of the world and really remote places, then that's only a good thing. Because I don't think generally that ecology and biodiversity are that well taught in schools. I think my own experience of the natural world came from one side of my family are farmers and the other side are horticulturalists. So my dad and my grandpa own a plant nursery, and my granny and granddad own a sheep and dairy farm. So when I was growing up, we'd always spend summers out in the fields with the sheep and the cows and like looking after the animals and just being in nature all the time and having an outdoorsy family. But I've grown up and lived on a really picturesque island that has tons of access to green space and blue space, like the ocean. But if you're living in the middle of a city that's 4 or 5 hours away from the sea, then maybe you've never, like some people have never even seen the ocean. And again, if you're living in the middle of a city, maybe the best thing you have in terms of access to green space is a small park just around the corner from you. So like it's, when we're talking about conservation, it's got to be conservation in mind with like everyone needs to appreciate this, not just the lucky few who've grown up in the countryside or who can afford to go on gap years to Thailand or wherever. It really has to mean it for everyone, because people who are living in inner city centres, poor communities, minority groups, they're all going to be the most impacted by climate change, and it's got to mean something to them. Otherwise, we're not going to see the understanding and the societal drive to actually do something about climate change, and then we're all kind of screwed.
Right. Yeah.
I guess all of these different experiences with definitely going through getting your PhD and just learning more about seagrass restoration, and also definitely all of the oceans you explored and just being there with the sea creatures. Have any of those experiences throughout your journey have they left like a deep impression on you, and were they a good impression or a bad impression?
Definitely a good one. Yeah, I think once you get a taste for really all the amazing things that are out there, you definitely get a bug for it. Like, I'll never forget the first time I got to snorkel with a whale shark. That's something I never thought I would ever see. And it's just this, like, it's the length of 2 meters. It's in, like, the scale is in, you can't really comprehend it until you're in the water there with, you know, that kind of size animal that, you know, isn't going to attack you because they're, you know, they only go after small prey and filter feed. But also they're not going to move out of the way for you because they're one of the biggest animals in the ocean. So yeah, you're kind of like scared, but it's like exhilarating at the same time. So yeah, or just even when you start to get into marine ID and you can actually recognize what you're seeing when you go diving, and then you kind of learn a bit about the amazing adaptations that those animals have, and you just start to think about all the potential in terms of like even something as common as like mussels, which I feel like anyone who lives near the ocean has seen a mussel, but actually they have this amazing ability to glue themselves underwater. And if you think about that, humans haven't developed a waterproof glue. So something as simple and common as a mussel is actually really being researched at the moment, because if we can unlock that science in terms of how you get that glue to bind underwater, then you can start really thinking of some amazing technologies going on in terms of like building houses underwater. Whether we should be doing that's another conversation, but you know, you start to really unlock incredible things. Something that people always say about the rainforest is, you know, the potential for new medicines, things like that. And really, like, the oceans are, I think someone said the surface of Mars, people know more about that than our own oceans.
Oh yeah.
That's insane. There's so much to know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think that really brings the like mystical, mysterious factor. Like, we really don't understand that much about our oceans. It's really amazing. It's full of just amazing like landscape, amazing marine life, and like, yeah, like how you mentioned, just creatures that appear very simple, modest, but they have very like extraordinary and like scientifically changing like abilities that they have.
Exactly.
It's really amazing. So as a marine biologist, you've probably encountered like a variety of like underwater creatures. So in your opinion, is there any species that are misunderstood by the public? Like, for example, what you mentioned about whale sharks, like, or like any other actual sharks, like people are scared of them, they're big, or all that stuff. So is there anything that you feel the public really misunderstood about a specific species?
Yeah, I would. I mean, you've already said it. Sharks are probably one of the biggest misunderstood creatures in the oceans, across, you know, all species of sharks, really. It's actually perfect timing for this because it's Shark Week this week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, how fun coincidence. So, you know, I'm definitely not a shark expert by any means. But yeah, I mean, this is really what like circles back to why science communication is so important, because the media will, you know, loves to spin sharks in these crazy ways where they, you know, they're really threatening, dangerous animals, and they can be dangerous if you're you know, your behavior is wrong or you're interacting with them wrong. But you know, movies like Jaws and stuff, these insane portrayals of great whites, completely over the top, and sometimes the media does get it wrong. And actually, there's amazing things we can learn about sharks. They can detect magnetic fields to find food and mate. You know, these deep sea species, which have so much left to know about them. You know, I think cows are more dangerous in terms of number of people killed per year than sharks. Someone in my department has actually managed to develop this amazing system where, like a series of magnets, it forms almost like a massive fishing line across a bay that small fish can swim through, but as soon as the sharks get near these lines of magnets, then they swim away. So that kind of system helps protect the surface and things like that. So, you know, these are like, it's simple, but actually the science behind it's really complex to be able to prove that this kind of technology works, and then, you know, to actually start getting funding to implement the science in real life is another huge step again. Yeah, there's so much we don't know about sharks. You know, they have 3 different ways that they can give birth. They can either do live birth like humans. They can either grow eggs part of the way inside them and then release the eggs once, and again in like a sort of live birth scenario, or they can lay eggs and leave them. Yeah, there's so many amazing things and adaptations about sharks that are really incredible, and they're so threatened with overfishing and bycatch at the moment. Shark finning is still going on, and even shark fins are still being imported into places like the UK, which you would never have imagined still going on, but it is, and I'm sure everyone is seeing the massive shipping fleets outside the Galapagos at the moment, which are mega trawlers. So they will literally take anything that is in their way. So as an international community, it's really important that we address these misunderstood animals, and also look at how we can, you know, build a more sustainable planet for this generation and for future generations, because it would be a real shame to miss out on you know, appreciating all these amazing creatures.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And just also like how you said with the media about all these like different sharks, they're saying them in like a way, they're saying them in a way and perceiving them as just these really scary creatures, but instead that there are so much more to know about them before people make these assumptions about these sharks. And maybe instead of like making these like movies that perceive them as like something negative, they should make it more of a positive way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But I'm a conservationist, and I don't know if maybe that would sell as many movies to have. I don't know. It's easy to make sharks into villains, but yeah, it's really not the case unless you're ill-informed, or you know, it's complicated. I'm not a shark conservationist, but especially in Australia, where you've got interactions between great whites and surfers, that's a more complicated issue that I don't really know enough about to make an informed opinion. But especially around the UK, you still get bycatch of sharks, like basking sharks, which are filter feeders. I actually saw my first basking shark 3 weeks ago, and I was showing people the footage, and they were like, "Oh my god, were you scared? Like, can they eat you?" And you know, people had these really great questions. They were really excited by it, but most of the reaction was coming from a place of fear, even for basking sharks, which are filter feeders. I don't think they've ever hurt a human really, unless, you know, they've been an accidental thing really. because they're not active hunters. Even if they see you in the water, they're not going to go for you because they don't have that predator instinct in that way. They literally just swim along with their mouth open. So yes, you could technically go into a basking shark mouth, but they wouldn't be able to digest you because they don't have the teeth structure for that. They do have teeth, but they're so tiny. Yeah, you would just be stuck there really, rather than eaten per se. I guess theoretically, but that's never happened. So, yeah, it's it's great to have kind of a space like Instagram where you can use it to help educate people, and allow people to like bounce off questions and pose these hypothetical scenarios that actually I did kind of think that it was interesting that someone asked, can I eat you? It's something that I maybe didn't think about, hypothetically. But yeah, I think it's just a great resource if you want to find out info. I've learned so much from other people's pages already.
Considering there is an immense amount of plastic in the ocean, like those like the big piles floating like in the ocean, and all kinds of pollutants. Have you ever witnessed it in person, and just what are your thoughts or feelings on
it? So yeah, you're absolutely right. Plastic pollution in the oceans is a huge issue. We found plastic shopping bags at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest part of one of the deepest parts of the ocean. That's insane. That's really insane. There's so much plastic in some whale species that has gone up the food chain that they now can't reproduce because it's got into their reproductive system. So they're basically, like, we call it genetically defunct. They can't breed anymore. It's never something, I've never seen one of these great garbage patches that are going around, but I have seen plastic. I am always about taking 3 bits of plastic every time I go to a beach, and I've found wrappers and things that come from the Mediterranean or America or Middle East, Africa. Because you can see that the wrappings have all these different languages on them, and that's it's insane that that tiny bit of rubbish has travelled all that way and ended up on a beach in the Isle of Man that maybe that person's probably never even heard of because we're such a small little country. So yeah, it's a massive issue, and one of the really big issues at the moment with coronavirus is people reckon that the rate that people are using the face masks, that there's going to be more face masks in the sea than jellyfish by the end of this pandemic, and that's staggering. I absolutely think people should be using face coverings, but if you can, try and get one that's made of fabric that you can wash and reuse rather than just a single throwaway one. Things like even using a bar of soap rather than liquid soap. You've saved a ton of plastic there. There's people doing really great work at the moment with trying to reduce the amount of plastic in using period products. How much waste does that cause all the time? It's not a very glamorous subject to be talking about, but it's really important actually. There's so many things that we can do to reduce our plastic consumption in the UK, in America, these so-called developed countries. Actually, we're so wasteful. We can do so much more. I think the public, this is where science communication has been really, really successful, because I think the majority of the public do really know that it's a big issue now. And we've got amazing public figures to kind of drive that movement. But there's so much more that we can all do. I've tried to stop buying fast fashion, for example. I buy most of my clothes off things like Depop or eBay. Like small steps that we can all do to reduce plastic pollution, to make better choices in terms of, going back to shark bycatch, getting fish from more sustainable resources, or maybe looking into alternative diets, or just reducing meat consumption a little bit. All these things just help so much. But yeah, plastic pollution is a massive issue at the moment. I'm glad that there's people working so hard on it. But there's definitely things we can do as individuals as well to make a difference.
Yeah, I feel like most plastics been to more places than I've ever been to. Yeah, like you mentioned, it's just from all over the different countries, just and they're washing up so far away. Yeah, it's really crazy to think about it. And also the point where you brought up where we should actively be trying to reduce how much waste and plastic we use, and with the example with liquid soap, that's actually really I was like whoa, that's actually something I've never thought about before. That could actually be really useful, and if everyone actively try to use more bar soap, then yeah, the stats and how much waste we actually produce will lower significantly. So yeah, it's very important.
Yeah, and most of these, I don't know, I think people think that going plastic free is this really hard, expensive thing to do. Actually, not buying clothes firsthand has saved me a ton of money, which as a PhD student is perfect. Buying bars of soap instead of liquid soap, because they last so much longer, actually saves me money again. Things like not buying a bottle of water every time you go out and bringing your own refillable money. Most places will give you a small discount on your coffee if you bring your own coffee mug. Something that I've also fell in love with is using soap nuts to wash my clothing. So it's I think it was originally used by Aboriginal people. So just for average everyday wear, where your clothes are maybe a little bit sweaty but not dirty, and they just need a little freshen up, they're perfect. I think they cost me about £15 for a kilogram bag, and they've lasted me 4 years or something. It's insane the amount of money you can save from making these small but really significant changes.
Yeah, definitely.
I just taking these small baby steps to help our Earth.
Yeah, it's not about being a perfect person or whatever who never uses plastic. It's just making more conscious choices and doing what you can. I totally appreciate if you've got small kids, that sometimes it's just really difficult to have less plastic in your life, going through nappies all the time. I totally appreciate it. So anything that we can all do just to help a little bit is, if everyone does a small thing, then that actually amounts to a massive impact overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, through your experiences working with animals, seagrass restoration, traveling to all different kinds of oceans, and looking at reefs, all that stuff, is there anything you learned about being a marine biologist, or something you've never realized before?
Yeah, so I think, before I'd gone to all these places, I think I had a massive misconception about things like coral reef bleaching, or dynamite fishing on coral reefs, or artisanal fisheries, so like small local fishermen taking sharks out of the water and things like that. I think I had a huge misconception about that, in terms of like, why are these people doing that? It makes no sense. These are so important. Why don't they realize that the importance of these things? Why are they destroying these natural resources? But I've grown up in a very like privileged position where I've never had to experience I've never experienced poverty. So I went out to Mozambique, with the oceans, and it was so eye-opening. Salmon fishermen there, killing hammerhead sharks, for example, and then they are selling the fins to Chinese buyers and then eating the meat. It's really dangerous work for them. Most of them don't know how to swim, actually, and eating shark is actually really bad for you because of the amount of metal in there. So yeah, it can kind of give you almost like blood poisoning, and can stunt, especially for small kids, like can stunt brain development and things like that. So it actually makes it harder for those people to get out of poverty, because their brain's not developed properly. But once you see that and then take a step back, it's like, actually this, selling this shark fin is more money than this fisherman would make for the entire year just getting normal fish. That meat will feed, most of the village. And then on the horizon, you can see these massive fishing trawlers where, because Mozambique is a developing country, they've sold the fishing rights for its deeper waters to I think it's China, because they don't actually have the ability to be able to fish those areas, so they're making huge amounts of money off the revenue for selling off the rights to fish those areas. But then what you're seeing at a local scale is there's less fish on the reefs for these can't say it. So basically for these fisheries where people are fishing to be able to survive, as well as hopefully have a few extra fish that they can sell to other people in their village. And they're more resourceful. They're so resourceful as well. So nothing gets left to waste. We would see people playing drafts or checkers with shark vertebrae and stuff like that, and you would just people are so resourceful. And I think one of the impacts of coronavirus that we're going to see at the moment coming out is people will be getting desperate and just using any natural resource available to them to be able to survive this. And there's a huge deficit in funding for environmental conservation NGOs. So I think coming out the other side of this is going to be really interesting. Addressing my own misconceptions about what ocean conservation actually meant on the ground has been a huge learning curve, and that's why following intersectional environmentalist leaders in our communities is so important, because social justice is an environmental issue as well.
So with COVID-19 and just like everything happening, like all these deaths happening, has it prevented you to do any certain things as a marine biologist? Maybe, for example, going into the ocean and just interacting with the marine creatures?
Yes. So as I said earlier, I think at the moment I should be starting my fieldwork for my PhD at this point, but with South Africa in lockdown, it doesn't look like I'm going to be back there for another 6 months potentially. So I can work remotely. There's lots of being a marine biologist isn't always really glamorous, and with these amazing diving photos in amazing tropical places, sometimes it's actually sitting down and doing desk research or crunching some stats, and things a lot of things go on behind the scenes that people probably don't realize when they're watching David Attenborough documentaries or Nat Geo documentaries, for example. And when the Isle of Man had it, at the height of our lockdown, we weren't allowed to go out or anything like that and go diving. Now we've been COVID free for nearly 2 months, so we don't have to do social distancing anymore, which is really nice. So I get to go diving, but it's not necessarily for my research. It's really just more because I find it very zen, and it's a nice break to just be in the ocean and have nothing else to think about other than just being there and seeing what's right in front of you and breathing, basically. So it has definitely had an impact on my research, but thankfully I have a great supervisor, Professor Sophie von der Hayden. She's great. She's been supportive and understanding, and she's just been great, because we all have to adapt in these kind of times, and she just said to me, like, I think you should just go home, because we don't know what this is going to be like, because I was humming and hawing about whether I should stay or not, but we've never seen a pandemic like this in modern times, so there's no precedent for it, really. So I'm really glad that she told me to come home, because I wouldn't have been able to come home for a little while. So I can't complain too much. The Isle of Man is a beautiful country. So and I'm not complaining. It'll mean that I'll probably have to get an extension of 6 to 12 months on my PhD, but that's 6 to 12 months spent in South Africa, which is also a great place to live, and beautiful people, beautiful country, and really warm, friendly people. So I'm not too disappointed about that either.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm very lucky.
Yeah. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Katie, so much for coming on with us and using your time to just tell us more about marine life, about what you do, just raising awareness, reducing plastic, and seagrass restoration, and all that stuff. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my first podcast, and it was a real honor. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening. Check us out on Instagram at EarthLinking2020. Check out our website on Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at EarthLinking Team. Donate to our GoFundMe located in the description box of our first video.
And this is Earth Listening. See you in the next episode.